Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy, Gsluke, here with our course breakdown for this week's Pebble Beach Pro Am. We've got ourselves Pebble Beach Golf Links, an iconic major championship level venue that's going to host the world's best this time around. We've got an elevated field for the first time ever at Pebble, which is going to look a lot like we saw at the US Open the last time we played at Pebble, rather than a little bit of a weaker field event that we typically get for this week. So looking forward to that elevated status, and of course a golf course that is one of the most picturesque in the entire world. You got great views on every single hole, a lot of creative shot making that is needed around this track, and a winner that is typically a really good iron player can fill it up on those POA greens, and one that is deserving every single time. So looking forward to it. Going to give you guys all the info that we need for this week, whether you're out there betting outrights, playing DFS, all of those sort of things. We're going to go over the key stats to keep an eye on and what kind of skill set should shine around Pebble Beach. So a lot to get into. Let's start it off with some course specifics, both for the Pebble Beach Golf Links and Spyglass Hill, which is going to be mixed in for a round over there on Thursday and Friday. Like I just alluded to, we've got two courses this week rather than the three-course setup that we've had over the past few seasons. So a lot of changes. So we've got the elevated status, only 80 players teeing it up. That means that there's no cut at this event. And on top of that, no need for the three-course rotation. So it'll just be Pebble Beach and then Spyglass Hill that's mixed in. And on top of that, the Pro-Am's only going to be for the first 2 days. So Thursday, Friday are going to be slower rounds. They need to split up the field so they can actually finish on time because of the amateurs playing along. By the time we get to Saturday, Sunday, they're going to head back to the Pebble Beach Golf Links, and there's not going to be amateurs playing, and they'll be able to fit in all 80 rounds. So it's going to have a little bit of a different feel this time. I feel like it's a little bit more of an official golf tournament over the weekend without having to deal with the Pro-Am aspect. And on top of that, a field that is going to be just so top level, right? You're going to have the Rorys, all of those, Scotty Scheffler showing up to this golf tournament that you don't really see most years at Pebble Beach. So you'll see it at the US Open, right? Anytime they play it at Pebble Beach, but it's nice to see from one of these regular tour events for once. So we're going to focus on the Pebble Beach Golf Links because we will see it for 3 of the 4 rounds. They're both par 72s, so there's not going to be a setup change out there from Spyglass to Pebble Beach, but I will say that Spyglass is the more difficult of the two setups. So unlike some of the other course rotations where the other golf course will be a little bit easier than what you have with the main golf course, it's actually the other way around. The greens at both courses are pretty small. In fact, they're actually a little bit larger over there at Spyglass Hill, but you've got some deep, gnarly natural area over there at Spyglass. So if you're missing off the tee, a lot of times you'll have to take penalty drops. And on top of that, the greens are infamously difficult. I mean, I'm talking about some of the hardest to read greens in the entire world. There's a lot of slope to them. They're extremely awkward in terms of their shape. And though they're 5,000 square foot, they play a whole lot smaller than that. I think of one green in particular that's about 7-8 yards wide at the very most, and it's about like 30-40 yards long. So again, this number, about 5,000 square foot, I think is a little bit deceiving. And if you look at some of the scoring averages, you'll see that this golf course plays significantly more difficult than Pebble Beach. The only exception to that would be on really windy days, as Spyglass has a few holes that are a little bit more sheltered than what you have over there at Pebble Beach, where pretty much every single hole is wide open to the wind. So on windy days, I think it'll be pretty flat in terms of which course plays easier than the other. So if you are playing showdown purposes, right, for the first 2 rounds, most of the time you're going to want the guys playing on Pebble. But if we get some nasty weather day, and as of right now, it does look like it's going to be extremely rainy this week. If it gets windy, right, you might want to take a look at some of the Spyglass guys. But for the sake of this golf tournament and what looks to be a rainy but calm weekend, it's mostly going to be these Pebble Beach Golf Links players. And in general, right, this is the course that we're seeing for 3 rounds. I already mentioned the fact that there's tiny greens over here at Pebble, but it's also an extremely short golf course at less than 7,000 yards. It's at that short distance despite being a par 72, and also despite the fact that some of the par 4s are nearly 500 yards. So in particular, holes number 10 and 11 are nearly 500 yards apiece. You also have a few par 3s that are 190, 200 yards out there, but a ton of holes that are sub 400 yard par 4s. You've got a nearly 105 yard par 3. You've got a few par 5s that are just about 500 yards themselves. So it's intriguing, very diverse setup, right? You've got those long par fours where you're just looking to make a par at the very best, and then you've got a lot of just gimme birdies out there, which is why the scoring is volatile, like it is. It's why on Sunday there's no lead that's safe around a Pebble Beach golf links, especially if the wind were to kick up out there. So we've seen a lot of nasty weather around Pebble. Just think about last year with the Monday finish that we had to endure, and with the forecast this time around, it looks like the same kind of thing might happen. So if that's going to be the case, scoring might be a little bit harder to come by when it's super wet out there. Playing during that rain is the real concern. Playing after the rain, you're going to see some pretty low scores. So you're going to have to keep tabs on that on the weather, as we get closer to lockout there. And if it ends up looking like it's going to sprinkle before play, right, maybe overnight, just make the course nice and receptive. Probably lean into that birdie percentage a little bit more, right? Might play a little bit easier in those kind of circumstances. Whereas if it's going to rain all day, if it's going to be an absolute slog, if you're going to have wet grips, wet everything out there, probably ball in hand in that kind of scenario, might actually be a little bit tricky. And you saw that last year. Round 3 was a little bit trickier than what you had for round 4. And it was because of the timing of the rain. Round 3, you had at least half the round that was in an absolute downpour. Whereas in round 4, it lessened up a little bit. Conditions were perfect for a lot of that round. And you saw the scores improve out there quite a bit. So you're going to have to keep tabs on that. It's always a talking point anytime you play at Pebble Beach, but especially this time around with the given forecast that we're looking at. You've got Poa Nua greens. You're going to hear that mentioned quite a bit. They are tricky Poa Nua greens, so that's something worth keeping an eye on. In the rough this year is listed at 2 to 3 inch ryegrass / Poa Nua. Now it's worth noting that this 2 to 3 inches isn't all that atypical, but it's normally listed at 2 inch rough. And if you look at last year's report, it's listed as 2 inch Poa Nua. So the fact that they're leaving it, out to maybe 3 inches this time around shows that they might be trying to spruce it up a little bit. We saw that for the US Open. Obviously, I'm not expecting it to be US Open type of rough out there, but it wouldn't surprise me now that we have the world's top end players here that they were to, maybe try and make it a little bit more difficult than it was before. So that's something to keep an eye on. We'll get plenty of reports from the golf course this week. With that, designated status, there's going to be quite a bit of journalism, right, going on this week. So let's keep an eye on some of the course reports, right? See if maybe that rough's a little bit spicier than what we're used to seeing. But it's been very wet out there. They've had rain for, I believe, like half the days this month, leading into January. They're going to have all that rain Thursday, Friday, potentially even Saturday as well. So they might not be able to cut the rough out there. It might just be growing out there with all that moisture they've gotten. I think that's a hidden storyline that we might have come Wednesday. So keep an eye on the rough this year. But outside of that, we know what to expect from Pebble. It's short. You don't have to be that long or that accurate off the tee. It is a lot more about hitting these small targets into the greens, right? They're only 3,500 square foot greens, and they're real tricky. So if you miss those small targets, you're going to be, penalized rather harshly, right? You've got a lot of slope out there. Poa is not all that easy to putt on. So unless you're hitting the ball, stone net dead every single time, right, to 1-2 feet, you're going to have a lot of uncomfortable 4 to 8 footers for par, which is why you see a lot of elite level iron players succeeding that aren't putting themselves out of trouble, aren't putting themselves out of position, and you see a lot of really good Poa putters. So those are going to be some of the key stats that we're looking at later, right? Specifically looking at approach on small greens. Also, some of your approach stats from 125 yards and in. Because we have such a short golf course, when we go hole by hole, you'll get an idea for all the different wedge shots that you're going to hit. We really want to be hunkering down on those sort of approach players. So that's what to expect from Pebble. Like I said, Spyglass is going to play a little bit more difficult, but that's only going to be in the rotation for 1 out of the 4 rounds. So in terms of the statistical profile, we'll head over here to Bet the Number. If you guys are looking to get access to this, code Gsluke for a discount on any membership. But we can get a good idea for the types of averages that we've seen, which if you're betting props is extremely useful, particularly for some of these, specific categories that you can bet on out there, but also gives us a good idea for the types of players that we should be looking at. So in terms of your fairway percentage, it is significantly higher than your tour average. In fact, a whole 10% higher than what you're used to seeing. So nearly an extra fairway and a half that's hit per round. Your green and regulation percentage is slightly higher than tour average. It's not incredibly higher, but considering that we only have 3,500 square foot greens, right, much smaller targets than what you have for most golf courses. The fact that the green and regulation percentage is higher than what you're used to seeing is all indicative of the lack of length, right? All the wedges that you're going to be hitting, when you're hitting a shorter club, you don't need as much room to hit the green, right, to go out there and be accurate. So you're going to see a lot of precision this week, even with the small targets. Your scrambling percentage is right at the tour average. Your 3-putt percentage is also right dead at the tour average. In terms of your birdies and bogeys per round, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but are all very typical averages of what you'd see at tour events. So there's not a lot of, craziness with the golf course, right? You'll make your fair share of birdies. You'll make your fair share of bogeys out there at a Pebble Beach. But the skill set to get there, though this looks typical, is atypical, right? If you look at the off the tee success last year, a lot of your dark green is over here in approach, right? As opposed to the off the tee success. Around the green is not that plentiful. In fact, a lot of guys that were losing strokes around the green, right? That finished in the top 10 last year, but a ton of shots gained putting. So you'll see this at a birdie fest, which is not really what we're going to get this week. You'll see that at like the Amex, you'll see that at like the Century Tournament Champions, right? This approach and putting profile really going off. It's not so much the scoring aspect that we're looking for. It's the type of golf course we're playing, right? Off the tee, it's real short. You're not really going to separate yourself with the off the tee play. US Open type of rough would change that. So that's why I mentioned that as a potential side little storyline to keep an eye on, is that maybe the off the tee play could be more important this year, but typically it's all about that approach play and then all about the putting down there. We go down to the next season, go down to when Tom Hoge won, you'll see it's the same thing, right? Off the tee, you have guys gaining, but not really separating themselves in terms of their off the tee play. The approach play, a lot of dark green, right? You have Tom Hoge gaining 2 strokes per round, Spieth near the 3 per round, over 2 strokes per round for Troy Merritt. Losing around the green, right? You have a few gainers, right? Obviously, Patrick Cantlay gained to the field out there in 2022, but all this dark green with the putter. And if we go back the year prior, right, it's the same thing. A little bit more off the tee play. The year that Daniel Berger won, you can see that there. It was played a different time of year, so that actually might have a lot to do with that. That's intriguing, right? If we're going to get longer rough this time around, right, maybe we see the same kind of effect where the off the tee is a little bit more important, but a ton of dark green with the approach play, and then the putting's the same kind of thing. You can see Daniel Berger, right, didn't gain a ton of strokes with the putter. Same thing with Matt McNeely, actually, which is surprising, given McNeely was #1 on tour last year in putting average, but all the dark green down here in the rest of the top 10. So it's a golf course that we are used to seeing. We kind of know what to expect. Course history is extremely sticky from player to player. So when we go through our key stats and our custom model here in a few minutes, you'll get a good idea for the types of players to keep an eye on. And just a little hint at it, a lot of the players that are at the top of our model, and there's a little bit of course history baked in, but are all the course history guys, right? So the model tends to be extremely predictive of the kind of success that we're going to see around Pebble Beach, which is why I love this golf tournament so much. Now for a real quick flyby of the golf course to give you an idea of the kind of shots these players will face. So first off, short little par 4, less than driver off the tee, probably like a 9-iron, maybe pitching wedge into this green, and a birdie look for most players. Hole 2 is your first par 5. It is played as a par 4 for your US Open. So obviously no US Open this week. It'll be played as a par 5 and real gettable in 2 and a birdie look for most players. Hole 3 is a short par 4, 399. The more aggressive players will take driver over the corner and end up somewhere in this vicinity, up there short of the green. If you do take 3-wood, like a lot of players will, over here to the right, it's a tough little landing area to hit, which is the incentive, I think, to go with a driver, right? Because it's tough to hit the fairway anyways. But if you do, another birdie look with a wedge. Hole 4 is 333. It looks drivable on paper, but in reality, it's not. It's a risky tee shot if you were to go for the green, and even if you do, the bunker shots are nearly impossible. So unless you end up in this fairway area and have a little pitch on, these 50, 60-yard bunker shots are, just asking to be hit into this ravine over here on the beach behind the hole. So it's a little tricky short par 4. Hole 5 is a real tricky par 3, 199. Everything slopes from left to right. If you miss to the right, you're down on the ledge and screwed in the natural area. If you miss to the left, you have an almost impossible up and down. So it's real tricky. You'll see plenty of bogeys at hole number 5. Hole 6 is your next par 5, so clearly a birdie look, right, because it's a par 5. But if you miss in the bunkers to the left, it's tough to even get it up on this ledge over here for your layup. And if you miss to the right, you're in the Pacific Ocean. So, get it in play, drive it well at hole number 6. You'll have a birdie look, but you have to be careful about it. Hole 7 is the picturesque par 3. It's maybe the most photographed par 3 in all of golf. It's steeply downhill. It is completely exposed to the Pacific Ocean. And if it's windy out here, could play real difficult. In fact, it could play over par. There are stories of people having to hit 6 irons down here with a 90-yard shot. Then, of course, if it's calm out there, it's a wedge in, right? You'll see just birdies all day. A birdie barrage if it's going to be calm out there. It's a variant, but a lot of fun to watch. Hole number 8 looks fun on paper, right? It's only 427 yards, but you have to lay up off the tee. There's that ledge that Jordan Spieth nearly fell down when he had to hit that approach shot. And then a tiny green out here that is well protected by bunkers. The rough around this green is also really long compared to the rest of the golf course. So hole 8 is a lot trickier than it looks. Hole 9 is one of the hardest holes in the entire golf course. It is 529, an absolute bear. If you miss the fairway here, a lot of people have to lay up to this hole. And just really whether it's the approach shot, whether it's the green that's a little bit tough, right? It's a tiny target out there for a long par 4. It's not fun. In hole 10, the same thing, right? Nearly 500 yards, an absolute bear when it comes to the par 4. Just hoping to make a 4 out there on that hole. Hole 11 is 388. This is a shorter par 4. So kind of similar to some of the front 9 holes, right, where you have those, 3 wood maybe wedge in. Same kind of thing for hole 11. Hole 12 is a longer par 3. You have a tiny green, also a 200-plus yard approach shot. So it's pretty tricky out there, especially with the small target. Hole 13 is 447, so a medium length par 4, and this green is really flat, so it's meant to be a little bit of a break hole. It's not all that difficult out there, and I believe this is the hole that Mav McNeely lives on. That or 12, it's one of those two. Hole 14 is a par 5. This is routinely one of the hardest par 5s on all the PGA Tour. It's 589. The layup area is extremely hard to hit. And this, tree over here to the right will block out a lot of shots. You'll have people that hit this cart path and go up into this out of bounds. It's just devious at times. If you can, get it up near the green in 2, obviously the pitch shot is a lot easier to get up and down. But you'll see a lot of people bogey hole 14, which is rare, right, for a par 5 in the PGA Tour. 15 is 398, definitely a birdie look. Another one of those, 3 woods wedges. 16 is 406. Same thing, rinse and repeat, right? A little bit of a dog leg to the right. Hit the fairway, hit a good wedge, and you're going to have a birdie look. 17, tough par 3, plays directly into the Pacific Ocean, so you have a lot of wind, right, that'll sweep across this hole. And then the shape of this green is completely unfair, right? So where they have the pin on this overhead view, they'll never put it there. It would be beyond unfair, right, to have it in this little strip. They'll put it in either one of these little bulbs over there, right, this little figure 8 little shape they have. And no matter where they put it, it's extremely hard. It's just a long, brutal par 3. 18 is 538, so it looks reachable on paper, but this one's a lot harder to reach than people would expect, whether it's the oblong shape of the hole, whether it's the fact that you have this penalty area down the left, the tree in the middle of the fairway, which will block out some of your approach shots in. Not a ton of people hit this green in 2, which, again, surprising given the short length on the scorecard. It is playing at sea level, right? It does play a little bit cool this time of year, right, over there at Pebble Beach. So both of those factors definitely lead into that. But with the world's best, like Rory McIlroy playing it, you have to expect that some of them will be able to get home in 2. So it's a great finishing hole. It's iconic. You'll see some of the best approach shots into this green if you can hold the green. Because, I mean, look at it. It's like a postage stamp out there. It doesn't have much depth to it. It's a tiny target pretty much from any angle. So if you're going to hit it in 2, you're going to have a real good look at eagle. But good luck accomplishing that. And now for our key stats section. So what we're going to do here is go through my modeling, some of the key stats that we're including in it, and then go through some of the players that are popping in any one category. So right now it's sorted by the model ranking, which you can see over here, right? Some of my top plays overall. But just to go stat by stat, first off, we got putting on POA. So if we sort this by putting on POA, you'll see some of your top players. It'll be Denny McCarthy, Max Homa, right? They're getting huge boost in that category. Taylor Montgomery, Brendan Todd, S.H. Kim, right? All standouts there. And it's pretty simple, right? You've got that grainy POA over there that'll grow throughout the day, that'll drive some players nuts, and is why a lot of guys won't even play over here with the Torrey Pines at the Farmers or this week for the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro Am. Some maybe don't like the Pro Am aspect, but a lot of them just can't stand putting on POA. So if you look at some of the guys that have succeeded on this type of grass, you'll be able to find a little bit of an edge out there, and a lot of it makes sense, right? You know, McNeely, for example, right, is from out west. In fact, one of his family's houses was on Pebble Beach, so clearly has played this golf course quite a bit. Taylor Montgomery from out west, right? West Coast Max Homa, right? Who has almost all his tour wins out there in West Coast POA. Denny McCarthy is good pretty much regardless of the surface. But look at that, right? 1.6 shots gained per round are all really going to be popping in my models this week. It's not a putting contest per se, right? You still got to drive it decently. You've really got to be dialed in from 125 yards and in to win this week. But the guys that are cashing in these putts, especially because you only have 3,500 square foot greens, right? Your putts are going to be like at most 20, 25 footers. If you can get hot on the greens, that's how you can go out there and spike a 5-6 birdie round. So I'm going to be looking a lot at the POA numbers, just like we were at the Farmers Insurance Open, except probably a little bit more this week just because of the lack of ball striking, right? I mean, it's a short course. You still see ball strikers, right? You still see, particularly with the iron play, a lot of guys popping. But a lot of your top end finishers, you know, are guys that are gaining strokes with the flat stick. The next key category is this 90 to 130 range. This is one that I completely agree with over here with Bet the Number. It was one of their top custom model rankings, and frankly, I completely agree with it. So the reason for that, if you took a look at all those short par fours, almost all of them are going to be from 130 yards and in, right? If you went out there, you hit a 3-wood on some of those 400-yard holes, you're going to have like 130, which for a lot of tour players is a pitching wedge, maybe a degreed wedge for some of your longer players. And then if you hit a driver off of those holes, you might have like 90 yards or less. So you want to try and find the guys that excel in either one of those ranges. So if we sort this by 90 to 130, just really try and hone in on what is most likely a pitching wedge or less for these guys. You've got Hideki Matsuyama at the top, Brendan Todd, who's also one of the better POA putters, who also played really well here last year, right, with a T2 finish. So he's popping up across a couple categories there. You have Scotty Scheffler, deadly from 130 and in. You have guys like Tony Finau, Hogard there. Small sample for Hogard, but that's great to see out there with how he played last week. Taylor Montgomery again. Interesting, right? Lucas Glover, kind of predictable there. Andrew Putnam, kind of predictable. Hostler, Morikawa, Chris Kirk, right? Guys we'd kind of expect to see at the top of this list, but maybe a little bit more surprising. Eric Van Rooyen, right? Sam Ryder popping up again. Kevin Yu, really good from 90 to 130. That's not a name I was expecting to see here. A name I was expecting to see, though, right? Tom Hoagie, right? Winner at this event. Had a 12th place finish the year before that. Also happens to putt really good on POA. So not a surprise that he's my number 8 ranked player this week. So you got that from 90 to 130. If you're going to look at some of the par 3s, right, maybe some of those par 5s, right, trying to reach them at 2, I'm looking a little bit at 175 to 225. The Bet the Number model was a little bit more bullish on this range than I'm going to be this week. But if you want to look at that, right, for your par 5, par 3 scoring, your par 5 scoring, Eric Van Rooyen's towards the top of that list, right? We liked him from 90 to 132. That's interesting. Scotty Scheffler, right, is going to be towards the top of like every category. So not a surprise there, but Patrick Rogers, another guy who's been pretty decent on POA. Maybe not the best overall. You can see it actually. The events that we're pulling from here is losing to the field. But if you look at his putting stats at this event, right, 2018, 2.8 shots gained, 2019, 2.7, a shots gained in 2020. Last 2 years was just a little bit over the positive, but at least at Pebble Beach, right, this specific golf course has been pretty good on POA. So I'm sure a lot of that's probably because of Torrey Pines, right? Some of the other events that he's had to play, that it's bringing down that shots gained average. But I like to see that he's also popping up from 175 to 225. Ben Griffin, Cam Young predictably, Tom Hoagie, right? So Another category where he would have popped up, as a past winner, Svensa, Straka, Ricky Fowler of all people, right, showing up on this list. A few guys you might want to consider. A category I think is a little bit sneaky, right, is approach into small greens, right, having those tiny targets. So in terms of comparing to their baseline, you've got guys like Morikawa that are a lot better than their baseline when greens get smaller. Guys like Hovland are towards the top of that list. Once again, Erik van Rooyen showing up, which, it's beyond a little trend at this point, right? He looks like he might be a sneaky play at this type of golf course. Hideki, Cantlay, a lot of just your top-end guys, right, showing up on this list. But you got Luke List, right? Chris Kirk showing up there. Max Homa, who's a play that I really like this week, all showing up towards the top of our model. So putting that all together, right now, just sorting this by our model score again, you see number one was Brendan Todd, who undoubtedly I'm going to have an investment on this week. Now, it's not going to be for an outright. I'm not that bullish on his chances, but for DFS, maybe a top 20 bet is just screaming that kind of play to me. So I like Brendan Todd there. Scotty's always towards the top. Doesn't really change my opinion on him. I still think he's going to be a good play at pretty much every event this year. So cool. Okay, Scotty number two. Homa number three is interesting. Last week, one of my top end plays was okay, right? T13. It's not like he played poorly. A little bit disappointing though, because I took him for like outright stats kind of thing. I might just be going right back to the well, right? Checks the POA box emphatically. Decent with all the approach ranges, right? Good on those, approaches to small greens. And I think the thing I like the most is look at the shots gained profile, right? In terms of tee to green, 5.7 shots. Nearly 8.7 at the Century, right? 7.5, right? The top 10 there at the Fortinet Championship. And the putter's been okay, right? He lost a bunch of strokes at the Century, at least gained last week back on POA at the Farmers. We're used to him having spike performances of 4 or 5 shots gained with the putter. So Max Homa, I'm going to talk about him a lot this week, as you guys can probably tell. If he continues to do this ball striking thing that he's been on, and then goes out there and gains on POA like he's used to, right, gaining 1.3, nearly 1.4 shots gained per round on POA, good night, field, right? He's going to go out there boat race somebody. So he might be a look on this type of golf tournament. Keith Mitchell showing up, good course history. Look at this, T4 last year, T12 the year before that. That's a name to keep an eye on. Denny McCarthy, Mr. POA, right? Really good track record here too, so he's an eye to keep an eye on. Sahith Theegala completely let us down last week, right? T64 finish. Only finished T65, had a horrible weekend at this event last year, but he's popping across a few categories, most notably with the putter and then some of your long irons. Tom Hoagie, right? Not a surprise that he's played well here. He checks a lot of boxes, and on top of that has a good course history, so he's probably worth a look for a top 25, probably over there for DFS. You've got Bo Hostler showing up again. The guy's just playing better golf. So, look at this. T6, T47, T15, T2, T7. That's what you'd like to see from a Bo there. Hideki Matsuyama has been playing a lot better too. And look at this. 7.26 shots gained tee to green last week. Still losing some strokes with the flat stick. But as soon as he turns that around, he's playing well enough tee to green to win or compete in golf tournaments. So a few names to keep an eye on in terms of the modeling. In terms of value plays, you've got guys like Svensson up here again. Kevin Yu, I told you I was a little bit surprised by him, right, over there at a 7.6 rating. Erik van Rooyen, again, popping in a few categories we're considering. Taylor Montgomery, right, another guy who will be a value play this week. And S.H. Kim, probably the last one that showed up a few times. So just a few names to keep an eye on. In terms of my top plays early in the week, again, I'll elaborate on this through all my content that I'm posting. But, Max Homa showing up quite a bit. Brendan Todd for sure. Tom Hoagie for sure, keeping an eye on him as a few targets I'll be getting to some exposure this week. And now for our comp courses. So over here on Data Golf, where we can take a look at their course fit tool, which is one of the free tools they have posted for people on there. Let's take a look at some of their top comps. So the ones that stand out to me would be TPC Southwind at number 3. It's a course that we see every year. We have shots gained for, which is a little bit of a leg up over those courses at 1 and 2. And on top of that, I agree with it, right? Short off the tee, more about your accuracy than anything when it comes to that category. And then you have a bunch of shots from 125 yards and in. So the approach profile, very similar from golf course to golf course. The agronomy different. You've got Bermuda grass over there with TPC Southwind, of course in Memphis, opposed to the West Coast POA that we have at Pebble. So a little bit of an agronomy change. I think that, the leaderboard crossover might be a little bit junked up because of that. But if you're going to look at some of the approach profiling, I think that's a good golf course to get your approach stats from. So next up, we got Port Royal, the next one that really stands out to me because it's one that we're getting shots gained stats from, right? So, unlike Warwick Hills or, St. George's, for example, it's a course we see every single year. And while we're not getting detailed shots gained metrics, we are getting leaderboards with PGA Tour level players. So if you're looking for leaderboard crossover, you're going to get plenty of that with Port Royal. And the approach profile is also very similar, right? It's almost parallel to what we're going to get this week. A lot of shots from 125 yards and in. Some of your par 3s, your par 5s, you will be tested from 200 yards and out. So once again, the same types of approach players, tend to pop at Port Royal is what you'll see for this golf tournament. Brendan Todd nearly winning last year, has won over there at the Bermuda Championship. I don't think is a coincidence. I think it has to do a lot with a lot of the similarities between these tracks. And then the last one we'll leave you with here is TPC Craig Ranch, where you have a lot of shorter par 4s, right? It's how you get to like 25, 30 under par and win that golf tournament for a lot of years. And then you have some longer par 3s. You have some longer par 5s where you're going to be tested with the long irons, but then plenty of those, again, sub 400 yard par 4s, we're just going to be tested from 123 yards, 130 yards and in. So I like that for TPC Craig Ranch. Again, a course that we see every single year. And unlike Port Royal, one that we do have shots gained metrics for. So you can take a look at that. Different agronomy, right? Just like Port Royal, just like we have TPC Southwind. But in terms of the types of ball strikers that are succeeding, I think you can take a look at a lot of those for that crossover. The added little bonus, right, would be to find guys that have that crossover that also go out there and gain strokes putting on POA. If you can find that, that would be the sweet spot with a lot of your 7, 8K plays this week. It'll be how I'm handling a lot of my analysis out here for the Pebble Beach Pro Am. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the course breakdown this week. Appreciate all the support here on the channel as per usual. Smash that like button for me on your way out of here, and also comment down below what you've got as your winning score this week. If you go out there, guess the exact winning score, you'll go ahead and win a free month of my Patreon. And given the soft conditions, the fact that it looks like the winds are going to lay down a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and take 22 under par, which is probably a little bit optimistic. It's a much lower winning score than what we're used to seeing at Pebble Beach, but given the fact that we have better players this time, right, and increased field strength, on top of the fact that we'll probably have ball in hand for the entire golf tournament, I think that we might see slightly better scoring conditions than maybe what we're used to seeing around a Pebble Beach. So let me know your thoughts down below. Again, if you get that winning score, you will get a free month of my Patreon. So go ahead, give it a go, and support the video here with a little bit of a like. I appreciate you guys. Best of luck with any bets, any DFS lineups that you're entering for this golf tournament. We'll have videos coming out both for DFS and betting over the next day or so. Our weekly live stream will be back to Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So all the usual good stuff. Looking forward to it. Should be a banger week with this field in this golf tournament, and looking forward to it.